restless dreams. I see that town. Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday. And you finally did. Silent Hill 2 is finally back through Bloober Team's remake. And whoo boy! Bloober Team? We're making Silent Hill 2? This is gonna go so wrong. What the fuck? From the start, people were skeptical in Bloober Team's capabilities in actually bringing over Silent Hill 2 to a new generation of consoles. And I completely get that. Silent Hill 2 is a masterpiece when it comes to subtlety in its story. Something that today really isn't seen enough. But against all odds, they pulled through and created the second best receiving Silent Hill game since the franchise conception, being only 1 point behind the original. Personally, I've always had faith in Bloober Team. I knew that if anyone would realize how much is riding on this game, it'd be them. In fact, I originally had a video script ready for why the Silent Hill 2 remake would never exceed the original. And why that would be okay, which, in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't need to post that, because I am so glad this remake is as good as it is. Now, this video doesn't necessarily have a review type structure, mostly since I'm making this video to just let my thoughts out about the game. So without further ado, let's begin. If the Silent Hill 2 remake does anything well, it's defy expectations. It doesn't even take 10 minutes before you realize that Silent Hill 2 is very different from Silent Hill 2. They really should have just added remake into the title. This for me personally became very noticeable the moment I tried to get the radio. Basically, while the story of Silent Hill 2 remains the same, everything from puzzles to room layouts to combat to even how you traverse through the town has been changed completely. It means we'll have to let go of our muscle memory and simply trust our instinct somewhere to go. Something I wouldn't have expected to be able to do in a million years in Silent Hill 2 specifically. Most of the old puzzles can be found, however, they're in an already completed state. It's just a fun little reference. Or it could have a deeper meaning, like the popular theory of James just being stuck in an infinite loop, traversing through Silent Hill over and over and over. On top of the sections and layouts being completely different, exploration in itself feels much different too. You can now break windows to get to new places and go out of your way to commit crimes. Because theft is cool. Yay. On top of that, remember that one breakable wall in the original? Yeah, that's a gameplay feature now. Which kinda makes sense. It's a little weird that the original just had a breakable wall once and never again. So in the remake, this section really does not feel out of place. On top of that, with crawling and climbing now being part of exploration, this game strives to let you explore the town like never before. And don't even get me started on the detail. If it wasn't for the monsters roaming around, I'd do anything to visit the locations from the game in real life. Never has Silent Hill felt this alive yet abandoned at the same time. Puzzles also do something interesting where they are much more often combined with exploration. Take the clock puzzle for example. In the original, you look at a wall, you turn around. Wow. Now in the new one, you find the hand, go to the clock, and you unlock a door to find the next hand, to unlock another door, and so on. It really shows that Silent Hill 2 isn't meant to be the same game. And that's something I can appreciate. Speaking of something that's completely different, combat! This was another feature so many people were scared of. And rightfully so! The combat trailer for the remake made it look like Leon Kennedy just possessed James and said, fuck it, let's play bingo. And yes, I know the original had a combat trailer too, but I mean, you see where I'm going with this. Combat is something Silent Hill has always struggled with. Usually the combat in these games are abysmal, if there even is any, and when it tries to create good combat, it basically fails at that and everything else. I'm looking at you, Homecoming. Anyways, how well does Silent Hill 2 do combat? Well, pretty alright. Is it what I expected from a Silent Hill game? Well, I mean, I don't really know what I expected. In the original Silent Hill 2, you basically had the option between fighting an enemy or dodging it. And by dodging it, I mean running past it. The remake, on the other hand, wants you to actually fight these enemies so much more. Or at least, that's what it feels like. It could also be that I just suck at combat. Oh boy, it's not open. It's not open. It's not open. Oh boy. Oh, I shouldn't have rushed in here. I should not. Enemies are now able to rush at you easier, and with the limited ammo you're given, it basically creates a completely new experience that fits the franchise quite well. And it's not like there isn't any evading enemies in this game. The employee elevator section in the remake is incredible at making you have to sneak around and evade one single overpowered enemy. But I'll get back to that later. Speaking of enemies, the Silent Hill 2 remake actually put effort in and tried to make every enemy unique. Originally, every enemy just walked up to you and bonked James on the head if they could. Sometimes you had a slight difference in how they worked, but overall, yeah, it was pretty much always the same. In the remake, the most notable examples are the mannequins, who hide behind objects poorly. But not poorly enough for me to not notice them, because I'm a blind idiot. Oh, health drink, health drink, health drink, health drink! I'm glad I can immediately use the health drink. Thank you. God damn it. The lying figures, also known as the vomit spewers, actually explode, and nurses have way too much health for their own good. Basically, all enemies feel unique, making combat much cooler and tougher to deal with, especially when handling multiple enemy types. This all causes Silent Hill 2 to go from being the easiest in the franchise to becoming the most difficult entry in the franchise. Well, again, either that or just really suck at the game. What? How? How are you still alive? And that doesn't even begin to talk about bosses. The bosses in this game have been completely changed, giving them longer playtime. Every boss feels incredible to play. Perfect examples of improved bosses are Abstract Daddy and Eddie. Eddie, well, hasn't changed that much in terms of gameplay, but definitely in terms of atmosphere. Eddie's boss battle in the original felt goofy. James called him nuts, shooty shooty bang bang. In the remake, James actually feels threatened by Eddie. The player actually feels threatened by Eddie. Whoa! The fact that you are barely able to see in this tiny-ass room trying to find your opponent is incredible. And it just goes to show that the Silent Hill 2 remake really knew what it was doing when it comes to improving these bosses. Now, probably the most important aspect in any horror game is, well, the horror. In a time where mascot horror and jump scares dominate the genre, it's easy to wonder if Silent Hill 2 is actually able to frighten people. Well, I'm here to tell you, if the original game was the SpongeBob roller coaster, then the remake is the Phineas and Ferb one. Silent Hill 2 is by far the scariest Silent Hill game ever released. Hell, I even dare put it above PT, which I have not played, nor I think should count as a Silent Hill game, but hey, that's a topic for another video. There have been multiple times throughout the remake where I was genuinely terrified. Hello? Oh my god, that's... oh my god. Monsters that could easily be walked past in the original suddenly felt like a genuine threat. Pyramid Head felt like a genuine threat. Oh, whoa, he was there. Everything in this goddamn game felt like a threat, and I was on edge at every single second. One thing I definitely need to bring up here is the map. In the original Silent Hill 2, whenever you pulled out the map, the game stopped. You could take your time, looking at where you wanted to go, and you continued on your way. In the remake, everything from checking your map to solving puzzles happen in real time. The game doesn't stop. If you're around enemies, they will be able to get your ass. On top of that, loading screens are completely gone in the remake. This means that walking through doors won't get rid of what's on the other side, nor will it stop them from coming through said doors themselves. All of these changes cause you to stay alert at all times. A good example of perfect horror can be found in the Lakeview Hotel. At one point, you have to put all your items away. In the original, you just kinda had to walk past enemies, quickly get through every door. But in the remake, you actually have to sneak around and avoid one single overpowered enemy. It's a perfect example of just how well concepts from the original games have been utilized to make a frightening experience in the remake. While I haven't mentioned it in the above, the sound design also helps to elevate the horror, especially with headphones on. The game uses every single trick it has up its sleeve to its advantage, making you feel constantly on edge and immersed. Though I will say I do miss some songs like Piece of Serenity and Epilogue Pianissimo, which used to play during the results screen. Now, one of the most important aspects of Silent Hill 2 is its story. It's a beautiful, well-crafted tale on a level that no other horror game has ever been able to achieve. And goddamn if they haven't been trying to do so for the past 2 decades. I would talk in detail about the story of Silent Hill 2, but there's like a bajillion videos already doing that. It's incredibly subtle with what they tell you about the characters, making you have to figure out most stuff for yourself. This is where most people were worried. In an era where video games keep holding your hand at all times with yellow paint everywhere, it's easy to think that Bloober would try and spell stuff out more, especially with their writing experience being... So, how did they do? They nailed it. In fact, besides one scene and the ending, I do think every single scene in the game was improved upon. And even the scenes I do have a problem with aren't that bad. They simply just don't reach the same heights as the original. And if you never played the original, it honestly wouldn't be that big of a deal. It still captured the essence of what the scene needed to be incredibly well. However, one section that without a doubt blew me away compared to the original is Lakeview Hotel. While most of the locations we visit have gotten a major glow up, none of them really compare to the beauty that is Lakeview Hotel. After taking about 10 years to cross the lake, we end up at the dock, which in the original game looked like... But in the remake, it actually feels like a dock. It's beautiful. And that's just the beginning. The hotel itself got a beautiful garden as well now. And just like every other location, the layout doesn't feel like a hallway with a bajillion rooms left and right. However, for me, things really started to change with the big reveal of what James did. Which, before I continue, please play Silent Hill 2 now if you haven't gotten the chance already. I am begging you here. If you're still here after that little spoiler warning though, here we go. First of all, the tape itself is done beautifully. It really feels like a one-to-one recreation of the original game, up until the moment you see James suffocating Mary, which is now much more clearly visible. You then see James's guilt in his eyes, and then, welcome to the Nightmare Hotel. While every section of this game has been absolutely beautiful, Nightmare Hotel, or Otherworld Lakeview Hotel, is probably the absolute peak of this game to me, and exceeds far above what the original did years ago. In the original, sure, you realize you're in the Nightmare Hotel, but it basically just feels like nowhere from Silent Hill 1, but worse. Besides the fact that doors lead to places they aren't supposed to, it's basically just more of the same. Slam the enemies, make your way through. I get that I'm exaggerating a little bit, and I know there's symbolism behind it, of everything feeling so surreal to James that he doesn't know where he's going himself. But I don't care. I'm making a YouTube video and I'm allowed to bitch about these things. If people are allowed to call Eddie Benny, then I'm allowed to complain about this shit. In the remake, on the other hand, things are much different. You're alone. No enemies ready to kick your ass. The place itself feels like it's actually ready to fall apart. Similar to James' guilt crashing down on him finally. It really gives you a moment to let everything sink in. Something I very much needed in the remake for some reason. I don't know, I've really just been put quiet by that. Like, I know the twist, I know the story of Silent Hill 2, I know it better than some people on the internet. Like, you see so many, like, people complain— Oh, hi, Bleak from the future here. So, I didn't include a lot of, like, tiny details about this game that I, like, preferred over the original or the remake. But I did want to mention that I really dislike how they changed the, like, headphone bed scene from the original to this. Though granted, it makes more sense for it to be there compared to the fucking floating bed. But still, like, I feel like they could have incorporated the original dialogue better. On top of that, any enemy you do find isn't attacking you anymore. James realized what he has done. In other words, he doesn't need them anymore. At least, that's the way I interpret it. Everything between James and Mary felt such more real to me. Truth be told, 2 weeks before this game released, my mother went into the hospital for a major surgery. Beforehand, she told me that if there was ever a time she becomes nothing but a nuisance, she'd rather let her life be ended. At the time, I simply tried to shrug it off, but deep down it just kept me worried for the entire week she was in the hospital. My parents are the people most dear to me. They've helped me through the darkest moments of my life, and I'm sure that if my parents weren't as good as they are, my life would have ended a long time ago. While this at first glance doesn't have much to do with Silent Hill 2, I think these feelings I felt are similar to what James was going through. If there was ever a time where a loved one you cared about so much was in pain day in, day out, could you help them? Or rather, would you? I know it sounds like a ridiculous question, but hear me out. If you had to be by someone's side, who was physically suffering every single moment of her life, wishing their life was over rather than seeing it through to the end, could you just simply stand there and help them without feeling scared? If helping that person is going straight up against what they want, just so they continue to live in suffering, is it really wrong to simply let them be happy in the afterlife, not having to feel that pain anymore? As the doctor journal itself quotes, "So why, I ask myself, why in the name of healing him must we drag him painfully into the world of our own reality?" It's not a note directed to Mary, but I do think it fits quite well. As if this section wasn't dark enough, then we enter Angela. Angela's arc is probably one of the darkest stories in gaming itself, perhaps in the entirety of any media. Angela is a victim of sexual abuse who you meet multiple times throughout the game. Having killed her own family, most likely to escape the abuse she suffered because of her family, at the end of the game you'll find her at a burning staircase. Instead of being able to stop her from ascending said staircase, you simply watch as she slowly leaves. An interesting note here is to Angela, the entire town has always been on fire, exactly how we see it in the scene. This comes back to the fact that everyone in Silent Hill sees the town differently, with James seeing all the monsters and Eddie constantly seeing people laughing at him. No matter what you do, Angela can't be saved. she suffered too much and simply chooses to let the flames take her in. While people do speculate she survived thanks to her model being present in Silent Hill 3, I do believe Angela's story ends here, and the character in Silent Hill 3 is just an acid flip. I think what makes Angela's story so intense to me is that she's supposed to be the same age as me. It really makes you stop and realize how easy lives can differ. I stated before that I'm very happy with my parents, and I can trust them. But in Angela's case, she didn't have that luck. Even while talking about this, I have trouble finding the right words for Angela's story. It's only why I briefly mention it. But it's without a doubt one of the most tragic stories in any video game. Perhaps even in all of media. I know this ended on quite a sad note. But I do think that's part of the beauty of Silent Hill 2. This isn't a game where everything ends on a happy note with all questions answered. It's an experience where at the end you need to ask yourself these questions. Everyone thinks differently on what James did, if it was in the right or in the wrong from a moral standpoint. You don't go into Silent Hill expecting everything to be resolved. You just want to make peace. By now, it should be obvious that I fully recommend playing the Silent Hill 2 remake. However, a question you might be asking yourself is, do I think the remake can replace the original? The answer to that is absolutely not. No, absolutely not. While the remake is amazing, it really can't replace the original. In fact, I don't think anything can replace the original. Not even the upcoming movie, which we haven't heard much about. That being said, I think Bloober knew this just as well as me, and for that reason made this remake in a way where it doesn't try to replace the original. So many mechanics have been added, and while some puzzles might remind you of the original, none of them actually mimic them. It's also the reason why Bloober puts in nods to the original. It wants to show that there's still a reason to play the original game and that they want to keep its legacy. Silent Hill 2 is beyond a doubt my game of the year, and it has shown that Silent Hill still has potential. And that's why the only thing I can say is, well, Bloober, you made me happy.